Welcome, explorers. Fasten your taste bud, folks. This is the Flavor Expedition, and we're ready to embark on an incredible journey through the world of flavors. We're diving into the depths of food trends, exploring exotic taste, and navigating the ever-evolving food and beverage industry. Buckle up as we take off to explore the delicious, the daring, and the downright delightful dishes from across the globe. We are ready to set your palates on flavor-packed adventure, so let's get rolling. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's your co-host, Dan Follis on the Flavor Expedition, along with the other crazy co-host. We all know him, Chase Obachain. Chase, say hello.
Hello. I don't know about crazy, but I'll try to dial it up a little bit more for us today.
Yeah, we need a little bit more excitement out of you. You're just absolutely dead, and we want some fun today.
I'll bring the energy.
I want to get that spring spirit going and the flowers and the blooms and things happening. I do also want to let you know, guys, we have got a really exciting guest with us today, and I'm kind of stepping on Chase's toes because he's always got the great intros, but I think I have something here. I want to share with you guys.
Do it.
We're thrilled to have with us Raphaëlle O'Connor. She is synonymous with innovation and excellence in food innovation and production, and she's got a real passion for quality ingredients and a respect for the culinary arts that really brings together food and science in a way that's made her a real beloved figure for food enthusiasts and manufacturers alike. She's got a very impressive career and also operates her own freelance company, inewtrition, which is a very cool. Did I say it wrong? I like to say it together. Did you correct me? Raph, correct us. Is it inewtrition or inewtrition?
Either or. I think we have to be flexible when we talk about nutrition, and it's certainly a concept that I was trying to bring to the table where we can reinvent food, reinvent nutrition, reinvent health and wellness, and potentially do quite a lot remotely. So, that's where the I come from, around innovation, around internet. So it's a real pleasure and honor to be with you today.
So it can be either way then. Good. Awesome. Well, Raphaëlle, it's an honor to have you on the show. So thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's been a while. You and I have actually been on some webinars earlier this year and chatted about some fun things. We've also kind of thought, what would be fun to talk about with you and exploring, in this world of flavor and innovation. Would love to kind of maybe start off with asking some questions around, your perspective on what's happening with innovation today and some of the hot buttons or the hot topics that you have to address in that perspective.
Thank you, Dan. Certainly, there are a couple of areas where I would also be very curious to hear what your thoughts are, because I often rely on you culinary scientists and experts to give us some insights in terms of what's happening in the restaurants, and you have the opportunity to educate our consumers, to test loads of different prototypes. So it's really interesting that we are around the same table, almost, one of us in Europe and two of you in the States, to discuss, what's happening out there. From my perspective, what I'm particularly working on at the moment is quite polarized. On one side, we have affordable nutrition, using food and beverages to really satisfy the requirements, the expectation of people who may have been a little bit under pressure with their budget and what they allocate to their food and beverage purchase. So that's definitely an aspect where there is a lot of life cycle management or cost reduction initiative that we're currently looking at, because innovation isn't always about something very new or very disruptive. There is actually an awful lot of work that we can do looking at, basic science and nutrition around salt, around fat, around fibers, around carbohydrates. So that's definitely an area that is taking a lot of my time, and I think a lot of companies are focusing on that. And then on the other extreme, what I have seen is a lot of effort and investment around customized or personalized nutrition. So very geared towards premium, super premium type of products with a real health benefit and focus on health and wellness. So from a retailer perspective, in terms of product development and innovation, this seems to be the two aspects that companies are focusing on here in Europe. But I think from what I've heard outside Europe, it seems like it's also happening in the US and in Asia Pacific. Is it something that you have also noticed?
Jace, you got an answer on that? You look like you're holding your breath.
Well, I had such a question that I really appreciated something that you said in there that you were discussing, Raph, of, innovation doesn't always have to be massively disruptive. And I want to get back to that, but I want to make sure that, one, I answer your question. So before I accidentally tail off, what was the essence of your question so I can make sure I answer it appropriately?
Well, there are those two aspects. I think in terms of trends around affordable nutrition, is it something that you have also noticed as well in your space? The type of project that you're working on or the type of product that are being launched?
Yeah, I feel like there's a pretty large push, especially kind of from a top-down perspective when it comes to finding new ways to make I don't want to say the word nutritious, but nutrient-dense food or better foods available. And from an affordability standpoint, I know that there are quite a few organizations that are working on building out essentially prescription programs that are produce-based. And if I'm not mistaken, primarily on the West Coast. But essentially, that is to say that there are health and wellness-based companies and retailers that are looking to provide more opportunities or even completely free of charge opportunities to put produce and more nutritious foods into the hands of people who otherwise don't have the income to be able to purchase them. So that's absolutely a huge push, and it's not just from a processed food standpoint, but I love that it's coming from a pure fundamental produce standpoint. I think that it lends nicely into the fact that people have to learn how to cook and cook more healthy foods naturally. When you get a onion or some celery or carrots, they're good by themselves, but they're obviously much better when you know how to cook them and put them into a delicious meal. So hopefully that means that there's a foundational groundwork being built for people to have more delicious foods in the home as well.
Yeah, just that question, Raph, brought me to thinking really two different camps of financial benefit, right? You mentioned salt and fat, and I think fiber were your three components that you discussed, and then you went to what I felt was the complete opposite or higher into that perspective was customized nutrition for, which feels like it's for the wealthy or for those who have the money to spend. I think it's interesting to talk about the fat and the salt, and there's always questions around the American Heart Association has notoriously been wrong about saturated fats and polyunsaturated fats and all those things, and they've kind of revamped all that, and people are understanding what are good fats. Like those two words together weren't ever uttered when I was a child. Good fat that wasn't there, and now the focus on salt is really interesting to me. The way that certain salts are processed, they're being spoken about. Like this is getting social media attention, like where they're mining the salt, what nutrients are actually in the salt. And I think you're pretty lucky because you live up there in a very rich land of salt, right? And there's the Celtic salt is what I'm hearing touted as the most nutrient dense and the most beneficial salt. Is that anything that you're working with, those types of salts, or is it just sodium reduction?
sodium reduction is probably the best way to address it, Dan, in the sense that Chase actually mentioned ultra-processed food, and what we have seen is a lot of manufacturers using cheap ingredients to either mask some of the ingredients that might be of less quality, but also to increase the shelf life. So there is a very subtle balance that manufacturers have to optimize in order to have the best ingredients with the best nutrition and a process that is suitable to achieve a specific shelf life. So those are the variables that can be difficult to align and to get right. However, some manufacturers are a little bit loose, to say the least, and rely on products that are, either very high in salt or very high in cheap fat to add some weight into the product. But at the same time, from a nutrient density, as you mentioned, Chase, it is extremely poor. So there is a duty,
Sure.
I think, for anybody working in the food industry to really look at those ingredients, look at the quantity and the quality of each of those, look at the process in order to make sure that the end product can have a nutritional profile that is aligned with the consumer's requirement. And not all of the ingredients have to be very premium ingredients. There are some excellent products out there that have a suitable nutritional profile and that can be used. But it does require a little bit of effort and a little bit of a commitment from those brands and those manufacturers to optimize those type of products. So that's really what I was referring to. And salt is cheap. Salt can bring quite a lot of flavor, but it also have a significant impact if people use that type of ingredient on a long-term basis. So those are the type of ingredients to watch. And here in Europe, we actually have some traffic light now label that have to be put on the product for people to educate themselves and to have this awareness of the quantity of some of those key nutrients into the products.
Interesting. So something that you mentioned kind of in your first sort of intro statement as to what you're focused on and something that you're passionate about right now, and it absolutely stuck in my brain because it's something I love to talk about a lot, is essentially the function of innovation. And you said innovation doesn't always have to be extremely disruptive. And that's something that I really love, and I think that there's this kind of catch-all nature or almost hyper romantic nature where people hear the word innovation and they think you have to recreate the wheel or you have to create, the next chocolate chip cookie that's going to be the most incredible thing. But I find that innovation can be extremely, personal to any given organization or person. So, Raf, how do you, as somebody who works in innovation every single day, how do you define innovation, and what do you feel like it means or represents to different manufacturers or companies or organizations?
This is an excellent question. I would start with the culture. A lot of work that I do is actually around the culture of innovation, and that can be done in every discipline. And companies that are progressive, companies that are engaging with innovation would really try to embed it at the core of what they do and how they do it. So from the food innovation perspective, it's not in the lab. There are a lot of people, it's not only in the lab, I should say. And it is start in the operations, it is in the logistics, the supply chain, it is in marketing, communications, sales. So there are loads of aspects that can be extremely innovative and creative. In my space, in terms of food science and food technology, innovation usually starts with consumer insights. It starts with looking at trends, looking at those early signals, looking at what's happening in the culinary arts and culinary science space. In fact, if I can, when I have a project like that, I would really engage with people like yourselves, my marketing colleagues, my colleagues in operation, so that we can bring innovation by design and make sure that when we explore the space, we are all looking at it together in terms of having a multidisciplinary perspective in terms of how we are going to innovate. And certainly in the food and beverage industry, it has to be very connected with the consumer. So we do a lot of consumer insights, a lot of consumer research to educate ourselves and to understand, the lifestyle, the demographic, the preferences, the dietary habits. So depending on the market, depending on the product category, this is really the type of work that we do on a daily basis. And once we have identified this opportunity around innovation, whether it is cost reduction, whether it is better for you, whether it is plant-based, or maybe sometimes even bringing a new technology, we do competitive mapping as well to understand what are others doing. Then we are going to start looking at different ingredients, looking at some prototyping and product design, looking at a lot of lab experiments, and then maybe scaling it up in the pilot plant. Once we have a couple of prototypes, we usually reach out to the market, engage with our consumer, getting some feedback. So it's a very iterative process with some very clear criteria as well before we decide to commercialize the product. So there is a whole loop here that can go on for a couple of months in order to optimize the product before we scale it up and launch it. And then obviously
you actually answered one of my questions. Yeah, I was going to ask you, Raph. It seems like it's an incredibly detailed process, right? There's a lot of boxes to check. There's a lot of things to make sure you're doing right, and it's in food service to get this product that you've already worked on. I was going to ask you what your cycle is in time, and you said months, but on average, say you're innovating on an existing product. What kind of time cycle does that on average in general? And not a hard, fast and steady, but I ask this because in food service, if you're trying to take that product into a CPG store, it's going to require different packaging, right? If you're going to go into food service, restaurants, hotels, operators, that requires a much longer sales cycle. So I'm kind of like trying to put the timeline together. You're innovating, you're putting this together. What does that look like in a general sense?
Probably a 9-month time frame, Dan.
Yeah.
From
so
beginning
9 months,
to
and
end, I think 9 months would be the minimum amount of time that would be required to identify the ingredients, generate a couple of prototypes, getting some consumer feedback, optimize shelf life, packaging, and then we have the product to market and commercialization, which is usually already well established if it's an existing product, but again would need some work and some time to put that together. So it's usually very much a multidisciplinary team. We have regulatory, marketing, operation working closely together. We also have a very well-established stage gate process. I don't know if it's something that you use. Very curious to see how you do innovation in the culinary science space, but for us, it's quite established, and it has to be a multidisciplinary effort, and the parameter, the variables to move from one stage gate to another are usually, again, very well established and understood by all the functions.
Sure. Yeah, 9 months is pretty rapid as far as my experience goes when it comes to the world of product development. I mean, I know in my kind of past roles we were looking at everything from kind of a 12 to 18 to 24 month kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Life cycle or project cycle, just from inception and concept development through culinary development gold standard and formula creation and all of the actual product development that happens after that.
Yeah.
So to your point, 9 months seems like a pretty quick and fast sort of process, but it's good to hear that that's something that you have kind of built out in that way, because hey, a lot of companies really struggle with it. And I think it's something that I've seen a lot in my own work, of just the fact that these stage gates sometimes don't feel super obvious or intuitive within the process as to when something gets handed off from one team to the next, and sometimes things have to get handed back and just kind of reordered or readjusted or reiterated upon. So no, that's really interesting to hear, Raf. And I don't think there's anyone who does it perfectly as far as the product development process, even to this day.
Well, I think that also depends on what size of company you're working with, right? I mean, if you're working with a big national, international, global manufacturer, they got a bigger wheel to turn, right? You're working with a startup company; they're a little bit more aggressive. They're going to be excited about Raf's 9-month cycle. But to that point, I was just kind of curious what that, because often, and I'll say, I think it's important. You brought a lot of people together. Or at least you certainly suggest and recommend all these other teams to come together. I would say, raise my hand as a culinarian, bring the culinary team in as well. Bring us in early, even if it's just for 5 minutes of knowing what's going on, because they can certainly sway where you're going and how you're going. I had an experience where I was working on developing a cheese sauce, and it was before Zoom calls were really popular. And I'm on the phone talking to the R&D team, and they're like, "Oh, it's working." I'm like, "No, it's not." And I go, "Why is mine not working?" And so I said, "What are you guys cooking it in?" And they were cooking cheese sauce up in a beaker, right? I'm cooking it in a holding pan that would be used at the restaurant. And I'm telling you, that's no one in a restaurant's going to cook in a beaker. So culinary can bring some operational efficiencies and know-how of equipment uses to it, which I think can really enable you guys to get to that time frame that you're looking for. But yeah, that was interesting. Thank you for bringing all those pieces together. I think it would be really interesting to hear. Also, you'd mentioned to us off the call about beverages and coffee and some kind of neat things you've been working on. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So what we have found is that coffee here in Europe, depending on the generation, depending on the segment that you're targeting, can be extremely orthodox and can be extremely traditional way of preparing and drinking coffee. However, in other parts of the world, especially in China, they have developed a lot of new concepts to satisfy the requirements of different generations, the millennials or the Gen the Gen Y. And it is almost like a self-branding exercise where those people are engaging with this category as a way of demonstrating that they're attached to a specific brand or a specific lifestyle. So it seems to be very driven by technology. They can place their order online. They can pick up their drink and have it as they are going to work or they are going to the gym. And it seems to be very much associated with a completely new flavor, completely new colors, completely new texture. So we are moving away from the very well established rituals around coffee, maybe at different times of the day, in the morning or in the afternoon. Those are very well established consumption patterns around coffee. But in different parts of the world, for a completely different segment and a completely different price point as well, it's a lot more around lifestyle and around convenience. And what I discovered is that a lot of the flavor profile of coffee has also been modified, and now they are drinking a lot of fruity coffee. And that's definitely an association that I had never heard about. I don't know if it is popular in the US, but in fact, those brands haven't found their way in Europe, probably because we are a little bit more settled in our way. But in Asia, they're actually consuming fruity coffee and quite sour coffee, as opposed to the more bitter profile that we have here.
When you say fruity, do you mean they're flavored with fruit flavors like hazelnut coffee, or do you mean like coffees that have natural fruity profiles, like some through different processing? I know, the two big processes are natural process and wash process, which is the treatment of the beans post-harvest. Natural process generally results in higher acidity, more fruity notes on the palate. Is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about flavored type fruity coffees?
I'm talking about both. So I think they are doing some work on the processing, but they are also adding different type of syrup that are very fruity and very acidic. Which
interesting.
I mean, I've never drunk anything like that, but I certainly wouldn't associate that with coffee. It must be more some kind of a syrup with a touch of coffee, which I thought was quite disruptive. That's disruptive innovation as far as I'm concerned, but apparently people like it. The other aspect that was mentioned was around the fact that the price point is also a lot more affordable. So we are back to this affordable consumption of products that have been specifically designed to suit the lifestyle of consumers, and also to suit some of their expectations in terms of we are going beyond the product here. It's more a service. It's more a brand that people are actually engaging with.
Sure, interactive.
Yeah. Raph, I'm curious if you know.
No, that's an interest.
Yeah, I was going to ask
Go
you.
Ahead, Dan.
Curious if you know, is this an away from home engagement, or is this consumers, are they pumping syrups at home and mixing themselves? What is that? Because they have a brand. I feel like there's a cup with a name on it, and they're walking around showing their. Because here in the U.S., I mean, listen, there's no secret. Starbucks has changed the whole entire dynamics of coffee drinking, and they've brought in lower coffee, higher mixers, syrups, creams, different milks, alternate milks, a lot of things where you have children, like kids that can't even legally get a job, are going to Starbucks because they want to have, the unicorn latte or something that has zero coffee
frappuccinos
in it. Or the frappuccinos. I mean, they have they're syrups, they're sweet, and the sour is a new. I think the sour is a new flavor profile that we don't hear a lot about here.
Yeah, they're also now experimenting with spicy. They just released a line of spicy lemonades at Starbucks. So we're starting to see a lot of flavor exploration in the beverage world just in general. I mean, I think we did a episode on that already a little bit.
Yeah.
But now I want to make sure we give you, Raph, the chance to answer. Is it more of a at-home, bean and grinding sort of process and flavoring, or is it, brands that people are starting to associate with and kind of linked to their own lifestyle?
Very much out of home, very much on the go, extremely easy to afford, like in terms of pricing point. It's very much for the younger generation, and it's as I mentioned, some kind of a branding exercise, where I think in a world where people are struggling with maybe a sense of control or a sense of belonging, it's very important to kind of reach out to some products or some brands to find a level of connection. And
sure,
that's part of the concept of not only looking at it from a product perspective, in the sense that those have been specifically designed to suit the preference of a specific audience, much younger and probably more open to try different type of flavor profile. but also a lifestyle and a budget that is different from the traditional coffee drinkers. The other aspect that I should mention is, there are emerging markets in Asia that wouldn't have been big coffee drinkers in the past, which again are engaging with a category that is quite new to them. But the way they purchase those products, the way they consume those products, the way those products are perceived is very different from what we have here in Europe, or the more kind of orthodox category as we know it. And maybe just back to the concept of innovation, there are obviously opportunities to reinvent the category to suit a new segment, or to suit a new budget, or to suit a new market. Because as you probably know and have experienced, the same product cannot be always launched for a different region. There has to be some modifications to align with the consumer
the
preference.
Audience and the demographics.
Absolutely.
Sure.
So those are the kind of aspects of innovation that I think can be sometimes overlooked because it's a very well-established product, or because it's a market where it hasn't been made available to people up to now. But there are the opportunities, I think, that are currently commercially viable, but that can be often missed for companies. And in fact, some of those brands around the coffee category are very new brands that we haven't heard about before. Certainly here in Europe, we haven't heard about them. But they seem to be very progressive and establish themselves very well in emerging markets.
Sure.
I'm just curious.
I think.
I was just curious, are those American
ahead,
brands, Raph, that are making their way to these Asian markets? Are they recognized here in the U.S., or are they just completely brand new brands?
In fact, they are brands from emerging markets that are now coming to the U.S. One that I've heard about is Blank Street. Have you heard about Blank Street in the U.S.?
No.
I have not.
Okay, yeah. No, that's one of them. One of my colleagues who is based in China was highlighting some of those brands, which I never heard about. So those are brands from emerging markets that are now coming to the West Coast.
And what is Blank Street?
It's one of those pop-up shop selling those type of coffees at a lower price point that maybe the Starbucks or the well-established brands, and with very much on the go, very much based on convenience, and very much based on technology.
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah, I
was gonna say, I just looked them up online. They have some cool looking drinks. I mean, they're very eye appealing, right? I mean, very cool. Golden matcha, cherry cold brew. There's that fruity flavor, right? Cherry cold brew. That's really something you haven't seen around. So yeah, I'm sorry, but that was just, I looked them up. I was like, wow, they're in New York.
No, hey, I totally. I'll have to make a trip across the water here in the next couple weeks, try to get up there and check it out. No, I think it's such an interesting space, especially coffee being sort of the perspective that you built around there, Raph, and that there's so many different ways that people ritualistically enjoy any given food or beverage, and it's something that is worth considering as anyone develops a product. Is, of course, what time of day will somebody eat this? How will they consume this? And where does this product fit into this person's lifestyle? And what justifies it potentially moving something out of this person's natural pantry? And it's just such an interesting thing that when you mentioned meeting a target demographic or an audience where they are, I always think of the fact that Guinness, of course, is known all across Ireland, and it's so funny that we're talking, and this is coming to mind as you're sitting in Dublin, Ireland, right? But the thought process that it's also the most popular beer in Nigeria, and they have a specifically Nigerian-based brew that is slightly different but tailored to that market, and it's something that is enjoyed all across Nigeria. It's just such a funny thing that you wouldn't think of, but is, you know, they meet the market where they are, and it's something that we have to always consider. And I think especially in the beverage space, I mean, here in America, it's in a massive realm of kind of a renaissance of sorts, where we're looking at massive brands starting to adopt and move away from the traditional food-based operations that they are. Like McDonald's is now launching Cosmix, which is an exclusively or mostly beverage-based concept where they're messing around with everything from coffee to soft drinks and, you know, your bubble teas and sorts. So yeah, there's a lot of realm for exploration. It's certainly about time, because we've always focused on food and it's very saturated, but now we should start focusing a bit more on beverages and functionality for them.
In fact, I have a question for you guys around product mapping. That's an area that I work a lot with, whereby we have to identify the key sensory attributes or the key parameter that define a product. And from that, we develop a number of different prototypes, and we test those prototypes from an analytical nutrition, but very importantly, in terms of consumer preference. And we are struggling at times to repeat some of those prototypes and align those prototypes with our consumers. And I find that, you know, if we were working earlier with restaurants, with culinary science, we would probably be able to leverage a lot of that knowledge upfront. So in your projects, is it an area that you actually do for every project, or it's not completely established in your ways of working? How do you identify the specific attributes that are the most relevant to your target audience? Because for us, you know, thankfully we can leverage some research and some prior knowledge, but there is often an awful lot of time wasted in identifying those. So my question is, how embedded is it in the type of work that you do?
You want me to take that, or Chase, you want to go?
Yeah. Do you want me to take this?
Go for it.
So I love this question. I think that is an awesome question, first off. And, you know, how do you identify and understand and really map out what the expectation is on the other side of your development? Really, you know, I think with anything, the start of a project oftentimes is incredibly ambiguous. You don't always know exactly what that product is that's going to come out on the other side. You sometimes start with things that are something like a word cloud, right? Where you're saying it's something that needs to appeal to a certain demographic. It needs to hit X, Y, or Z nutritional standards or parameters. It needs to fit into this either kind of meal occasion, whether it be snacking or, you know, a full meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, etc. And then you start to kind of utilize all of this research, to your point, Raph, of, okay, you start pretty wide and then you start to narrow and narrow and narrow until you can create a bunch of either concepts or ideas, or maybe even prototypes that fit into all of those parameters. And from there, I often find that helps you really start to flesh out what's behind all of that. And you kind of pull back a curtain and say, okay, this is where we're starting to go. And we've identified a bit more of a focus and a bit more of a clarity. It's like you're looking through a lens at what you're really trying to get to oftentimes. And there's something to be said about just uncovering what that ideal product should be, rather than where you've started with all of these different kind of ambiguous descriptors. So, you know, for me, it tends to identify itself as we go through the product development process. And from there, you can start to really dive into and develop, different concepts and gold standards and build around what those standards of identity are, right? So, if you're looking to create something that is I don't know, Philly cheesesteak, you would look at something that is a standard of identity for a Philly cheesesteak, right? You need to have either a specific type of bread or a cut of beef. Maybe it needs to have a certain type of cheese. And maybe there's even specific ratios around that or cooking processes that are associated with that. So, really a lot of it comes down to, what are you looking to achieve? How does that align with where you started, making sure that you're still within those guardrails? And then once you've created something within those guardrails, how do you really nail down what that concept is to a further degree and still maintain recognizability and relatability for your audience, and then maintain that and track that and trace that throughout the process all the way through scale up and commercialization? So hopefully that's not too long of a rambly sort of answer, but that's kind of the way that I think about it. Is sometimes the product develops itself. It's just up to us to really understand and make sure that we're doing our job of keeping it within those guardrails.
Yeah. No, it's a great answer, Trace. I think you hit a lot of the important critical perspectives. But Raph, I think there's something else to add on to that, is understanding who's actually going to be using that product, right? So to me, it goes beyond just developing the product itself, but then where's it going? Is it going into a QSR? Is it going into a college university kitchen, or is it going into a vending machine, right? Like, how does this get worked with at the end? And I think that's a very, very critical perspective of it. One of the top developers in global KFC was at a Research Chefs conference years ago, and they had commented how if something doesn't pass their operational efficiency testing within a parameter of 15 or 20 seconds, no matter how good the idea, how good the product tastes, they kill it. And that kind of surprised me that they were so stringent. But then I realized and looked back and discussed and found out that KFC in Asia is a completely different operating restaurant than KFC in the United States, and the way that they're perceived, the way they run. And so it was like, oh, wow. I mean, no wonder they have, there's reasons for things to be successful. And Chase just mentioned, 99% of it right there. I think it's identifying all those things. And sometimes, like you said, we really don't know what it is we're going to do. It's often an ask from a customer, like, hey, we've got X and we want to be able to sell it into this unit that sells tacos. Can you fit it in their menu? And so you don't want to be using a shoehorn, to kind of open that taco up a little bit wider, just for the sake of getting it in there, right? You want to be able to understand the consumers, who their guest is, and are we going to appeal to them through the concepts, and then you want to use their pantry, right? So sometimes you don't have to reformulate the whole product that you're using. Sometimes you're just incorporating it into the mix, and it becomes a component to that build. So I think there's a lot of different ways to actually skin that cat, in essence, right? There's a lot of different ways to approach it. And one thing you kind of hit on quite a bit, which I really appreciate and respect, is understanding the consumer. Because so often an R&D person is just, can I actually functionally make this work, right? Did I achieve the right colors? Did I achieve the right stretch or cut or break or whatever that is? And they don't have that. They just leave that to the marketing team. I just think it's really smart when someone like yourself, takes a look at what the consumer, and have that in the back of your mind while you're doing your work. Because I think that's the most successful projects that I've worked on, is when I've had that kind of data to work with. It allows me to keep that holistically a part of the project. So may not be the clear-cut answer you're looking for project mapping, but I would say project mapping, or any kind of mapping, is definitely a part of the process that we check off boxes so we don't miss things. So now you got two
I
long
think,
answers.
the biggest. No, thank you, because it's useful to hear your perspective. So what I'm hearing is that in a way you are also landscaping that opportunity with your consumer. And the advantage that you have is you're a lot closer to that consumer than I am. Because in the food service space, you're engaging with that consumer on a daily basis, and the feedback that you're getting is probably a lot quicker and a lot more insightful. Often people like me, we have to organize focus group, we have to bring people into a completely different setting. So the way they engage with the product is likely to be very different than if they were in a different context. So we have seen a lot of difference in terms of contextual consumption and situational consumption. So sometimes the information that we are getting is not exactly a good representation of how the consumer would engage with the product. And by working with the consumer early and also regularly is really where I think you are in a position to be a lot closer to the end product and a lot more aligned with that target audience.
Yeah, and CPG product development, there's I completely and totally agree. There's a totally different, I suppose, process or song and dance of sorts where, you don't have the same context, and you almost don't want to have the same sort of context in the kind of front end focus group phase where you're just trying to make sure that something maybe meets with the project specs and meets all of the expectations, whereas later on down the kind of process you might run some of those in-home usage tests to see how your consumer interacts with that product within the context of their own home, and making sure that all of this work that you've done is essentially validated and you're meeting what you're looking to all along that line. So to your point, there's certainly something to be said about the different functions of bringing in and asking the right questions to get the right feedback at the right time from those different audience members, and also just making sure and validating the people that you're trying to reach are the right people that are even in that group, because sometimes you'll find that you've missed the mark, and maybe what you're looking to develop was kind of misinterpreted all along, and it kind of needs to take a step back or move back in the process. So no, I think that's a fantastic point, and that I've run quite a lot of focus groups, and I've been a part of a lot of those conversations where you start to say, okay, we need to go back to the drawing board because I don't think these concepts are really resonating, or I don't think what we've done here really matches with the occasion that we're even looking to kind of fulfill for this consumer. So no, that's a great point.
Yeah, Chase, you hit on
And
something
often
that.
we find out.
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead.
Well, I
was
wanted
just
to get a
saying
question
that
in
it's
before it
often
got too late.
It's often quite late in the process as well when you have that data and those findings. And that's why in my role as a consultant, I have really tried to compress the duration for those projects so that we can interact with the consumer at an early stage and then work on iteration. But that feedback is instrumental to get the product right and to have brand loyalty and repeat purchase.
Yeah. This is we've
Please,
got the
Dan.
Dublin delay, I think, is what we're experiencing. So I'm sorry for speaking over you, but I do want to ask this question because I think it resonates really well with the process that we are just discussing and what consumers want. And I would love to hear if you have a moment to share, because I believe the European landscape is much more forward thinking. What kind of innovation is happening around plant-based or alternate proteins that you feel is exciting and can possibly change that landscape?
I must say, in the last couple of years, Dan, the quality of the product that have been launched is pretty much on par with their animal counterparts. That's definitely a huge progress as to where we were 5 years ago. We have seen a lot of the products that were just average disappearing. So there has been a natural kind of selection process over the last couple of years where consumers' expectations were fairly set, right, in terms of sensory profile, in terms of price point, in terms of nutrition. And for the last couple of years, I think we have differentiated the man from the boy, so to speak. And the products that are now in the market are definitely of high quality from a sensory perspective. The nutrition, there is room for improvement, and I think the companies are addressing that. But we have a couple of plant-based products which are no longer trying to be similar to the animal counterpart. So I think that was an important learning as well for this category, is that they didn't necessarily have to match those products. So they seem to have found their signature. They seem to have found their unique characteristics. And as far as I know, they haven't completely met price parity. So I think they're relying on the volume and on the scale to be able to establish themselves. But certainly a lot of changes in terms of quality and quantity of products that are available here in Europe.
Yeah. Are the consumers in Europe, it's been heard, at least I've read many times, the European consumer is already much more willing to try these products. Do you believe that that the products that were launched in Europe met a lot of those initial expectations just because the consumers wanted them to be good or wanted to try plant-based? Is there, or is it did they knock it out of the park when they first launched?
It aligns with what I mentioned earlier. I think a lot of people wanted to try those type of products. However, the repeat purchase and the loyalty didn't stick, Dan, I have to say, because the products didn't meet the expectation. And so in terms of, consumer-centric innovation, value-centric innovation, those were the pain points that have been addressed successfully for some of those products and some of those brands. Still room for improvement and for innovation. However, I think we have a few products here in Europe that have survived and have really managed to secure an audience and isolate their own signature profile, which I think was critical for this category. So this was lacking before, but I think we are getting there now. The
Awesome.
technology has also progressed significantly, which, helped to meet those expectations. And more to be revealed. I think we are seeing a lot of innovation around ingredients of pulses and plant-based ingredients that are, again, really expanding in terms of nutritional profile and functionality.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I was just curious how that was going over there. So thank you. Chase? Can you hear me?
Sir.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I am absolutely here. No, I feel like we're getting towards the end of our time, and I want to make sure that I'm being respectful, Raph, of your time. Is there anything that we haven't had the chance to talk about that you feel like we've missed out on, and that you'd like to, put out there to the audience, either something for people to think about, consider, or something that you're working on that you're really passionate about right now that we can, make sure that we get out there before we let you go?
there are loads of different topics that I would have liked to touch on you, but I think it is more important to isolate a certain amount of directions that are relevant to ourselves and to our audience, and then we can cover other aspects at a later stage. Maybe one thing around health and wellness, something that certainly I is quite close to my heart, and I just would like to reiterate the fact that there are a couple of areas that I'm currently looking at whereby proactive nutrition, preventative nutrition, food as medicine is an area that consumers are really starting to understand and value. And to touch on whether it is ultra processed food, whether it is affordable nutrition, we have a duty as people who work in this industry to contribute to that transformation. And I hope that the people who listen to us today are actively engaging on that journey with us and addressing innovation in a way that doesn't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, but can be implemented across the organization to drive value, to drive sustainability, to drive nutrition to different segments, whether it is, children's, older people, active individuals. Those are the type of messages that I'm really would like to highlight, because we have seen a couple of, crises over the last couple of years, which I think should be resonating with professionals to ensure that the quality of the product, the raw material that are being used are carefully selected, and that innovation doesn't always have to be the most shiny or the most disruptive type of meeting the requirements and the expectation of our consumer. So I just want to, I suppose, deconstruct the concept of innovation and how we can contribute to the health and wellness of our consumers through nutrition and through innovation.
I love it. I love it. Dare to be different and be an agent for change. Change for good.
Yeah, no, that's a great message. Thank you for sharing.
A great message.
Well, Chase, I think we've taken more time. We've gone into overtime on this one, so we really want to thank you, Raph, for sharing all that insights and bringing your expertise to the table. We love your passion around not only just the scientific perspective, but what you just kind of wrapped it all up with the perfect bow. We are all feeding humanity, and I know from a chef culinary perspective, when I put out a plate, or whenever I've, worked in restaurants and have fed the end of the night, I'm always so excited that, man, how many covers did we do? And, it was great because you get to feed people, right? You feed, and in our world of manufacturing, you feed them by the millions. And so I think it is really important to think about those that are coming before us and those that are past, and taken care of in a lot of ways. So again, Raph, we really do appreciate you coming on board. We hope to have you back another time, because it sounds like we've got a whole nother podcast to talk with you on more subjects for sure. So
plenty of good stuff.
Yeah, and we always love to hear where we can find you, areas to send listeners if they want to find out more about you. I messed it up to start with, Chase, or we'll just ask Raph, how do you say your name or spell your website?
My website is inewtrition, inewtrition.com.
Okay, inewtrition.com. See, I just saw the first words in in nutrition. I thought she was in nutrition, not I nutrition, but it works both ways. And of course, social media. You're always active. There's some great webinars that you're a part of. So I really encourage people, if they see you, to register and listen, because it's always really great to hear you share your expertise. So thank you once again, Raph. Everyone else, Chase, why don't you take us out?
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Raph. It has been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you and talking. We will always have the door open if you're wanting to come back. Plenty more discussion to be had, I'm sure. Everyone who's listening, please go check her out on LinkedIn or at her website, inewtrition.com. And otherwise, we will see you out in the field.
Yes.
Before we sign off, we just want to say thanks for joining us.
And if you're building that innovation pipeline, struggling to stay on trend, having difficulty with creating new and hard-hitting recipes and menus, or maybe you just need some sales support or product representation, just reach out to either of us on LinkedIn or go and find us on foodtrendtranslator.com or chaseopenchain.com.